we're ripping out the bus seats, of course, because that's the thing you have to do. Before you can do anything else in the bus, you have to take out the bus seats because you need the space. And you obviously don't want the seats in the bus. If you wanted the seats in the bus, you'd buy the bus for the bus, and you wouldn't buy the bus for an RV. Right? Right. Okay. So, taking the seats out of a bus. This is a job that ended up being a lot more difficult than we first thought because, you know, you figure, oh, come on, you just unbolt them, right? Wrong. The bolts are so rusted, so gummed up, that when you go to spin them, all you do is spin the bolt, and it won't come off. The nut will not come off. There you can see there where I was grinding on that one. Grinding on that did not work. And the reason it didn't work is because these bolts are in a slightly recessed housing. And you really can't get a grinding wheel in there to cut it off. You'd have to grind the entire bracket off pretty much. That's a bit inefficient, so that's not what we're doing. So how to take the bus seats out? You need hammer, you need some crowbars, you need an angle grinder, and of course some wrenches. The first thing you do is you unbolt the seat from the rail. That way it will move. Later on we'll put a bolt back in there for stability, but for right now we have to take the bolts out. There was one in the front here, there was one in the back, and they're both out. After we take the bolts out of the back, our next step is to simply yank the hell out of this thing to bend those brackets on the floor. Because, oh, this one just broke, cool. To bend those brackets on the floor, now you can see what it did. It has bent these brackets up, making a gap. That's the gap we want. Because with a little more work, we can bend these lips up a little further, and then you can get a cutting wheel on the angle grinder underneath and cut the bowl off. That's what we've been having to go through. It takes anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes a seat, depending on how bad the seat is, but at least we're getting the seats out, whereas before I was hammering and banging and smashing around. And for those people who say just use a torch, we really don't want to because there's fuel lines down there. So we don't want to do that because I'm not sure exactly where all the stuff is underneath and I don't want to ruin it. All right, maybe that's enough lip to get it. Now comes the next fun part. Because we need to make a little more room. So we're going to pick it up a little bit. So can get at it. And I actually did have one bolt just break and pop right out with this, but I'm not willing to try it on all of them because I don't want to mess up the floor underneath. I don't know how sturdy things are. Okay. And of course, before we begin anything else, we must ventilate. Or, of course, you could just suffocate. That's the other option. You need one of these because crap flies everywhere. Fortunately, these are relatively cheap. I think it was under 10 bucks, maybe 12 bucks. Maybe it was a little over 10 bucks. It wasn't that expensive, but it keeps anything from flying in your face, and that's especially important because when these cut, those bolt heads will pop, and sometimes they hit the ceiling, so obviously you don't want your face in the flight path. So, squeeze it on my head here. The angle grinder is actually kind of a cheap one. It's Clark. got a cutting wheel on it, just a regular flat cutting wheel, 4.5 inch angle, 4.5 inch angle grinder. So that's all it is. All right, time to grind. We broke a disc. That happens. I hate to say goodbye to a good disc though. Broke when it popped. When it popped, it must have caught it. So that's why you need to wear the face mask. Because of things like that. So now we've ground off the bolts on the one side. Now, of course, if you try to jack it up to put pressure on it, all this thing will do is wiggle around, and it won't really, you can't really get under it this way. You can't effectively lift it. So we lower the jack back down a little bit. And what we do now is we grab a bolt, of which there are a plethora laying around. And these are the ones, of course, that originally came out of this side. And we're going to put just one back in and wind it down. Just hand tight. We're not, doesn't have to be real hard. And now, out here in the front, we can now move our jack over to here, under this rail, so that, oh, what I do with it, I'm an idiot. Here we go. So that when we lift it, it puts pressure on this bracket. Which means we can then get under that and grind that side off. So you'll see how high it pushed that up, how high it bent it. And that gives us access to get underneath it with the angle grinder and cut those bolts. And then one more seat will be free. And there's the seat out. Okay, and then all you have to do is you take the bolt back out of the back again, and this seat is now free. And there. And that's another seat out. It's not fun, but it works. So that's how we're taking the seats out. And that's it. Bye.